installment of our webinar series from 3GNY, Jewishness, Activism and Belonging, the Post-Holocaust Diaspora, and Intersections with Marginalized Communities. The goal of the series is to highlight the diverse intersections of being Jewish and descendants of survivors in the modern post-World War II era. My name is Lauren Engelman, and I am a very proud 3G, a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, my beautiful grandma Lily, who is 96 and my inspiration.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna and I'm the granddaughter of two Holocaust survivors, Max and Erna Hilfstein, and a member of the board of directors of 3GNY. Before we dive into tonight's program, we'd like to share a little bit about 3GNY for those of you who may not be familiar. 3GNY is an educational nonprofit for grandchildren of survivors and supporters. As a living link, we preserve the legacies and lessons of the Holocaust. Our mission is to educate diverse communities about the perils of intolerance and to provide a supportive forum for the descendants of survivors. And I am proud to say that I have been sharing my grandparents' stories in schools since joining 3GNY in 2018.
Hey guys, I'm Jonathan. And I am the grandson of two Holocaust survivors, Felix and Herta Zauberman, and a former member of the board of 3GNY. So speaking of sharing stories, 3GNY has a fantastic 3G speaker training program called We Do, which some of you guys know about, and it stands for We Educate. In this 4-week program, grandchildren of survivors learn how to organize and compellingly share their family stories in school classrooms and with companies and community groups as well. This school year alone, our speakers have told their family stories in over 250 classrooms and community settings, building personal connections to the lessons and legacies of the Holocaust for over 10,000 students and community members. This impactful work wouldn't be possible without the support of our community. A gift to 3GNY of any amount would be greatly appreciated. There's a link in the chat with ways to donate. So thank you guys very much. And we'll be sending you more information about 3GNY and We Do in a follow-up email after the event.
Tonight, 3GNY leaders and our wonderful interfaith spouses will be speaking and sharing insights on dating, marriage, kids, tackling holidays, and having a mutual passion for family stories of the Holocaust. We'll discuss the joys and challenges in an open dialogue panel format. This event digs into finding belonging as an interfaith 3G couple. We welcome and encourage your very respectful questions. Feel free to use the Q&A function down below. Feel free to add comments in the chat if you would like, and to share any personal experiences during the event in the chat as well. Please note that the views shared in this panel are our own and do not reflect the views of 3GNY as an organization. Let's meet the couples and get started with tonight's program.
Hi, everybody. So I am Anna.
And I am Aiden.
We live in the suburbs in Rockland County, just outside of New York City. And in October, we will be married 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God.
That's not funny. We've got two young children, a 5.5-year-old and a little boy named Max, after my grandfather, who's a survivor, and a little girl who's about to be 2 this summer. As I mentioned, I am a thanks, Joseph. As I mentioned, I am a board member of 3GNY. I'm also on the We Do committee, so I help to facilitate in the We Do classes and get our 3Gs ready to speak. Yeah, and like I said, both my mother's parents, and actually one of my great grandmothers were survivors.
That was good.
Thank you.
I agree. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Katie.
And we just moved out of the city. We were there for almost 10 years, each of us. And now we live up in Westchester. So we have been married for almost 5 years, which seems like a long time now. We have 2 lovely children, Daphne, and a newborn who's 6 weeks old and maybe waking up during this presentation, named Henry, and he's named after my grandma Herta, who was a Holocaust survivor. As I mentioned, I was a board member of 3GNY, and it was a great experience. Recently stepped down from that, and still very involved. And my family connection to the Holocaust is both of my mother's parents were Holocaust survivors. They met in a displaced persons camp, and they had my mom in that displaced persons camp.
Hi there, I'm Lauren, and this is my husband, Tom. You can say hi too, babe.
Hey, how's everybody?
We are located in Chatham, New Jersey, which is in northern New Jersey. Our 8-year wedding anniversary is coming up this fall. We have 2 beautiful children. We have a 5-year-old named Eliza, who is named after a survivor, my grandmother's mother, Elizabeth, and my son, who's almost 2.5, Daniel. We met on a blind date in New York almost 10 years ago. So we've been together almost a decade. I am on the event committee, also very involved with We Do. And my biggest contribution is producing and planning this event series for Jewishness, Activism and Belonging. And then my connection to the Holocaust is my grandmother and great-grandmother, who both survived Auschwitz, Bremen, and Bergen-Belsen. All right, and let's go ahead and we can start the panel conversation. So I think one of the main themes of tonight is that there's really no right way or wrong way to be a 3G or a Jew, or to advocate for survivors. So to my fellow 3Gs on the line, how does being in an interfaith marriage inspire you to be involved with your community, whether it's 3GNY, your local Jewish community, or other organizations?
I could take the first one. So, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think this was one I was thinking about for a while. I definitely think that it's just generally being an interfaith marriage, not just a 3G, but just as someone that's Jewish and someone that's not, has made me really kind of lean into that a little bit more. Ask questions that I wouldn't have normally questioned had I married someone who we sort of knew the things to do, went down the same pathway. And I think with respect to, being a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I think, Katie asked a lot of questions, which sort of, I'm sure she'll get to in a little bit, but she did not grow up in an area that was Jewish at all. And she didn't really know too much about it, certainly didn't know people that were Holocaust survivors or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. So I think for me, it put a lot of responsibility on me to teach, something that I never had to do. None of my friends from growing up ever asked me questions about my grandparents being Holocaust survivors. I bet you some didn't even necessarily even know that, just because it was all sort of assumed we were all Jewish. So I think with that, I think it was a pleasure for me to teach and tell my family stories, just to my in-laws, to my Katie's family, Katie's grandparents, and and her aunts, uncles, and cousins. And I'd say they were some of the, most inquisitive people and supporters of all of it. I mean, I'm sure some of them are even on this call right now. I mean, they have a wealth, for knowledge and want to learn more about me and my family's history, which has inspired me to look into it even more. And maybe it's even one of the reasons why I became involved with 3GNY, a few years ago. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting experience for me, but I am, very grateful for it.
Like very much like you, like Aiden didn't really grow up with any Jewish people or a Jewish community.
Not one.
No.
Not one.
So which, but I don't know if it inspires me more to be involved in 3GNY. I think having kids, it was definitely inspired me more to be involved. I think really when it came to like being involved in Holocaust organizations, not just this one, is that whether you are in, and the whole, there's no right way to be a 3G, whether I am married Aiden or somebody that was Jewish, I know who I am and what's important to me. And this is going to be a central part of my life, no matter who I ended up marrying. And I had mentioned previously that, there's no, even if I were to marry somebody that was Jewish, there's no guarantee that they would want to be involved or ask questions or be active. I dated somebody who was Jewish who they didn't enjoy their Jewish upbringing. They felt things were forced upon them and they wanted nothing to do with it. So with Aiden, it was completely different because he enjoyed the family dinners, and his family, just like you, Jonathan, asks me questions and are super supportive. And I could not ask for better in-laws when it comes to that.
That's really beautiful. I relate to both of you, John and Anna. I feel like meeting Tom and having his full unconditional love and support allowed me to feel really confident and comfortable leaning into being a 3G and getting more involved with 3GNY. And similar to John, I feel like my in-laws are my biggest cheerleaders, supporters. Anytime I do a speaking engagement, they are some of the first ones to log in, watch, send a text of gratitude and wanting to learn, reading my grandmother's book, just extremely supportive. And I've gotten similar to you all, like being a parent really what pushed me to lean into being a 3G and getting more involved in really knowing the stories and sharing the stories.
So spouses, what is it like to learn about the Holocaust and these family stories? Had you been exposed to Holocaust education before meeting your spouses? And feel free to share about the first time you learned of your partner's family story.
Yeah, I will. And it's really hard to describe it because I was having my father, like after me and Anna got married, my father and I had a discussion, and he was actually sitting at the table of our wedding, and there was a Holocaust survivor sitting at the table. And he was speaking with my father, and my father heard so much of this man's history and was just so about his story, was at the same time like just so impressed with the rich history that this person had of their family and the details and everything that this person went through. It's such like a crucial moment like in world history, but also at the same time being completely disgusted with humanity and horrified. And so it's really like a mixed emotion. Like anytime I hear these stories, like it's great to be informed, but it infuriates me. And like I really don't know how to be honest, how to place that frustration with just how cruel people could be to one another. Like I really haven't come to terms with that, but knowing these stories and hearing them that's the thing. Like how do you describe like when someone shares this story? Like you're grateful that the lineage is here and that my wife is able to be here and like we have a family and everything, but like to know that is in like the family's DNA, it's just there's always going to be that just that I don't even want to use the word anger, but just that disgust of realizing that of humanity's like dark nature. And if that makes any sense, if that's getting too like heady about it, like that's kind of like my experience with these stories. Like I've heard the stories, I love hearing it, but at times like I have to take a moment because it affects me personally, it affects me mentally, like and yeah. So I don't know if that answers any questions about like the time I learned my partner's story. I feel like I've learned more and more details each time I hear it, because it's not an easy thing, and especially not an easy thing when I realize that these stories are going to be taught to my children, because of course they have to be. And how is my son or my daughter going to react to this? At what age? And at what age do you tell them what specific parts,
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
So like, yeah, like, I don't know, like the first time I heard it, I could just say that it's just not a word, because you can like, yeah, like the story of survival is impressive and all this, but it's not, it's hard to use those words because it's horrific. And how do you explain something like, how do you describe something like that that is undescribably like terrible? You know, those are my thoughts. But what was the question?
I was just gonna say, I thought it was, like Jonathan said, I'm from Iowa, so I really didn't know anyone Jewish growing up. And so it's something that we talked about on our first date, because he was the first Jewish person I'd ever dated, and I was probably the first Christian person he ever dated. So it was something we talked about, very early on. And I thought both of his grandparents' stories were similarly horrific, but so inspiring to learn about and hear. And it made me feel so much more connected to him to hear about it. But what I thought also was so interesting is, and something that I never really thought about, was how it does trickle down to the different generations, like how it affects, his mother and his uncle, and how it affects Jonathan and all of his cousins. Like it really does. That's something I never thought about from the outside looking in, is how it really affects all the different generations, which of course is why we're here. But it's just something that as an outsider, I never thought about. But I was very grateful that I got to hear his grandparents' stories. They're both on video, like 2.5 hour long videos that really go into detail. So we sat down and watched them, and that really makes you feel a lot more connected to.
Yeah, so I can kind of echo some of those thoughts. And I grew up in North Carolina, and Lauren thinks it's funny, I went to one bar mitzvah. She went to one every weekend when she was 12 or 13. And what we learned about the Holocaust was basically academic. So we learned about it in history class. We took a trip to Washington, D.C., went to the Holocaust Museum. We saw it as this enormous atrocity, but we were sort of looking at it from the outside in. So I'm kind of a history buff. I've seen lots of documentaries. And so that was always a way of thinking about it as something that happened to sort of someone else. We can grasp the atrocities of it, but it wasn't as personal to me. I didn't know anyone who had been through it. It was something that happened in Europe. And it was very different when I first met Lauren. We didn't talk about this specifically too much. It was a little bit later on in our relationship where I got to hear more about it. And what really struck me was the personal side of it. Meeting someone who had gone through this and hearing her story, I mean, that is obviously very powerful. And the other thing that really stuck out to me, that I would say as somebody who's non-Jewish and not from this community, that was really hard to understand, was I always assumed that the Jewish people in Europe at this time sort of lived in their own communities. I thought that until I met Lauren. And I didn't realize until I met her grandmother that these were people's neighbors. This could happen to anybody. So that was something that really stood out to me, that in terms of the treatment of people and the turning on each other, that I didn't know growing up. That was really powerful to me.
All right, Lauren, I got a question for you. So do you think there's any misconceptions of being less Jewish for marrying a non-Jewish partner, enjoying things like Christmas or non-Jewish holidays or traditions? And, in terms of traditions, have you guys, blended your traditions together to make your own?
Definitely. I feel like even growing up, and it was my own bias, I always, sometimes, and it's wrong, totally wrong, I sometimes looked at couples or someone who married someone not Jewish, it's like it takes a little bit of your Jewishness away. But I realize now, being in an interfaith marriage, is that your Jewishness and your passion, it stays there, and your spouse and your traditions and your family and all these beautiful layers around it. It's only like net add to your life and traditions and your family. It doesn't detract or take away your passion for Judaism. I know in our family, we go big. We probably lean observance-wise more Jewish, but we go big for every holiday, and I have so much fun with Christmas. My husband's side, his mom's side, is a partial Norwegian, so we have this delicious dessert called rummegrut on Christmas Eve, and we celebrate Christmas with Tom's family, and we open the presents and go under the tree and wear the matching PJs. And then sometimes we'll even bring the Hanukkah menorah down to kind of combine those holidays. And then we'll celebrate all the Jewish holidays with my family as well. And I've really found for my own life, it's added so much beauty and joy to celebrate not only my holidays, but also Tom's holidays, and to get to bond with our families in that way.
What about you, Anna?
Well, I mean, as far as, yeah, there's definitely a misconception that somehow, growing up, I feel like there was definitely a lot of pressure. And I think that's part of that intergenerational trauma where it's like your grandparents, that they all were murdered. And if you don't get married and have Jewish babies, like you're failing them somehow. Like it's a lot, it's a tremendous amount of pressure and guilt. And there was a good amount of time where like I wouldn't date anyone that wasn't Jewish. And then I kind of, was this realization of like, I know who I am and what's important to me. And it doesn't, like Lauren says, like, our relationship just adds to my identity and that of my family. I mean, when it comes to like incorporating other traditions, like, I mean, Aiden's family is very far away. They're in South Texas. So we don't really get the opportunity to celebrate. I hope we can soon, but we haven't really gotten the opportunity to celebrate holidays with them. But my family is really close. So we tend to, celebrate the Jewish holidays together. We don't, my son now, Max, is in Hebrew school. He just finished, kindergarten year. And we do like, Aiden is not gonna be comfortable, let's say, coming with me to temple, but we do like for religious services, but the Purim carnival and like things like that. He's very much.
I'm just not very religious in general.
Right.
Like I don't like Christmas to me is watching Die Hard, and
which we do.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, like celebrating the Jewish holidays was a very kind of warming thing for me, because I lived so far away from home for so long. And I was always away for holidays, so I never spent holidays with my family. So when I met Anna and I started experiencing the Jewish holidays with her, it was great to see that these holidays were all really centered around family and the family unit and being together and dinners. And like that was something that I very much missed. And I love that the holidays aren't like buried in commercialism, much like the ones I was accustomed to growing up, or at least the way that we celebrated like Christmas and whatnot. Like it was about dinner and family and discussion, and I loved it, And so when it really came down to like her celebrating my holidays, I really didn't celebrate any. To tell you the truth, I worked most of the holidays because I was never around my family. So yeah, like I don't know, it's pretty easy. Pretty easy on you.
You are. It's true. How about you, Jonathan?
I think I definitely felt some guilt when we first started dating. There's no question about that. As Katie mentioned, she's the first non-Jewish girl I ever dated, and it just happened this way. So we didn't choose it. We met on a dating app. We never would have met each other otherwise. It just was sort of fate in that perspective. But I think it's an interesting thing. You guys both kind of mentioned it, but it was, a few years back, Katie and I went on a trip. It's not a plug for this organization, but it's another organization for any other interfaith couples who are on here, called Honeymoon Israel, which is designed for interfaith couples. And we went to Israel for 12 or 14 days. And one thing we learned when we were there, like the first day we were there, they said, people often think about it when, a Jewish guy or girl marries someone who's of a different faith, the community thinks of it as a -1. And we shouldn't think of it that way. We should think of it as a +1, right? We're adding to our community. We're such a community of a minority community of a small group of people. And now we have these great people like Katie and Tom and Aiden, who now want to learn about Judaism and who want to pass on, stories of the Holocaust. I mean, this is like such a positive thing, and it just sort of totally changed my perspective forever on what that's like. And again, it doesn't have to be that way, but especially for the people who are on this call, these are people who are really passionate about Judaism and passionate about being grandchildren of survivors. And we married people who were willing to be our partners and help expand that. So I viewed it as a beautiful thing from that, and I took it away. So I wanted to share that with you guys. But in terms of holidays, we celebrate all of them. I don't think we're discriminatory in that. Katie has come to temple with me many times. I have come to church with her many times. I view it as family. I mean, for me, family and values, and that's what I think we both sort of see our religion as, often. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to be with our family for all of those holidays. And I hope our children will, enjoy that. We obviously have very little kids, so we're going to deal with some challenges. We'll talk about that later on. And we know that it might make things a little bit more difficult, or having to explain things to children. But, for now, we've had a really successful time in exploring both of our faiths together and loving those traditions and holidays and making them our own.
Jonathan, I love that. I echo what Dave said in the chat, that +1 mentality. That's so beautiful. And it's so true. We're so lucky to have supportive spouses that want to partake in our community. The next question is for the couple. So feel free, any of the spouses, 3Gs can respond. How did you tackle as a team, this merging of different religions? Are there any kind of challenging conversations that stuck out to you when you were maybe planning a wedding or talking about raising children that you want to speak to?
You want me to go?
Sure.
This is such a big question because I feel like, of course, there's so many different things that we talked about. And obviously it wasn't just one conversation. It's something that, we talked about early on and continue to talk about today. I can vividly remember being like, but I want a baby shower. And he was like, you can have a baby shower. So, I think there's just, you sort of go through all the different life steps. And I just think talking about it and being very communicative and open and honest from the get-go, from the very beginning, is really the best way that we found that it worked.
We spoke about it. She wasn't it wasn't hyperbole when she was saying we spoke about it first, second, third dates. We really knew this was like a roadblock right away. And we needed to figure out whether it was worth pursuing and seeing, sort of testing each other's boundaries of, well, would you be comfortable with this? The question came, I feel like on our second or third date, you were like, well, would you ever put up a Christmas tree in your house? Or I said, would you ever send your kids to sleepaway camp? Would that, so for us, it was always stuff we talked about. I know everybody has their own, everybody sort of deals with it their own way, but I think for us, we tried to speak about it up front.
Yeah. And not to bring up honeymoon Israel again, but it was such an amazing trip for interfaith couples. And I think it just was such an amazing experience for the both of us. And when we came back from that, we started doing Shabbat on Fridays. It was such a nice, not even anything religious per se, but we would, bake a challah, turn off our phones, listen to music, light candles, have dinner, just such a nice sort of tradition. Now we have 2 kids and we don't do it as often, but maybe this is a good reminder to pick it back up. But that was one tradition that I think neither of us really did a lot prior. I never did. You didn't that often, but something that we really enjoyed sort of creating together.
Yeah. And the joke with both of my many friends from growing up and many friends from college was that Katie was the most Jewish of all of the wives, and she was the only one that wasn't Jewish, because she found something in it that meant something to her. Whereas, a lot of these people had grown up in in Judaism where they sort of took those things for granted. So it, again, +1.
I love that, the +1. I mean, we also talked about things pretty fairly early on.
Yeah.
We actually met, because I missed that part. We met working on a very low budget indie film.
Yeah, we do.
And we didn't start dating right away. And there was very like little pressure. So, we talked about all kinds of personal and family things. And so a lot of that was kind of like really out in the open before we, things got serious. And then, as part of like, as far as like the wedding ceremony went, like I didn't, we talked about like not wanting to make his family feel uncomfortable. And like, I wanted to have a fairly traditional, Jewish ceremony, but like not have a rabbi marry us. And your mom was the one who was like, but why not?
Yeah,
Like get the rabbi.
I definitely didn't want a priest or anything like that, but yeah,
Yeah. And so we did,
he was fantastic.
He was.
great.
We met with him 8 times. He really wanted to get to know us because he's like, I don't just marry, interfaith couples like on a whim. And he basically told us like there is more than one way to have a Jewish home.
Mhm.
And even down to like picking our ketubah and like finding something, the language that felt like us,
Yeah,
that felt emblematic of our relationship and not anything that was like put upon us. And yeah.
it was great.
I love that. Oh, go ahead, Aiden.
Oh no, I'm just thinking about like other things aside from the wedding and other like traditions. I think probably the one thing I wasn't like really prepared for, and this is just becoming apparent, was the bris. Like, oh, the bris. Like I thought I was prepared for that. I thought, oh my God, like I don't know if I could handle another bris.
He was very happy when our second turned out to be a little girl, because I told him, I was like, we don't have to do this, we could do a modified. And he's like, no, I want to, let's do it. But he insisted on watching, and
like,
he almost.
I'm a huge like horror movie fan too, like all that. And then I was almost on the floor. Like it was just so like, just so you know, if you're out there, you're married, you haven't had kids yet, and like you never been to a bris, breathe deep. Breathe deep.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny. Actually, speaking of funny, also, I did believe Anna. This is kind of a bit hysterical. Speaking of funny, I vividly remember the first time, because when I first met Tom, it was a very random kind of blind date. Like, oh, I literally thought I was going on it was just a date. Like it was just a date. And Tom had lived in Brooklyn at the time, and I lived in Manhattan, and Tom would be a gentleman and come drive and pick me up in the city. And we were driving through Williamsburg. And I saw all these Hasidic Jews on the street with all of the payas and the garb. And I'm like, maybe this is how I just break the ice. Because Tom, when he met me, he's like, are you Italian? Are you Turk? Are you?
I thought she was Mediterranean.
And because I have dark hair and green eyes, and I'm just like, okay. And so going through Williamsburg, I'm like, hey, so I'm Jewish, not like this, but like I'm Jewish. And it was like a nice like icebreaker to begin talking about religion. Do you want to speak to like our wedding or?
Sure, I'll talk about our wedding a little bit, but I also just want to echo a little bit what Aiden said in his opening remarks about religion. And I grew up Christian, but not just me, my whole family has kind of moved away from religion to a big degree. So when we started talking about how we would raise children and things we would do, my philosophy on all that was I just wanted to make sure that they were raised with good values. I didn't necessarily care if they were Christian values or Jewish values. I wanted them to have a sense of community. That's kind of what church provided to me, and the dogma of it was not important to me. I know there are certain holidays and things that we do like that are very important and I love, but in just the very broad sense of things, that was not my number one priority, was that they had to follow X, Y, and Z rules of this religion or that religion. So that was something that I think was fairly easy for us, because I think Lauren probably had a closer identity to her religion than I did, but there was still room for compromise, and we celebrate Christmas and Passover, and we eat a lot. We'll just say that. The other thing just about our wedding, which was kind of cool, Lauren found for our wedding, we actually were married by a couple, an interfaith couple. So the husband was a rabbi and the wife was a reverend. And they did some coaching sessions with us and told us some of the same things that you were talking about sort of making it your own. And that was a big lesson, that we could really take the pieces that were important to us and make our own life out of those. So that was a cool wedding experience. And we did sort of more of a traditional Jewish wedding, but interesting to have the two faiths intermixed in the actual wedding ceremony.
Definitely. When we're coming close on time, I want to ask a very quick question, and then we have a question that we really want to chat about in terms of our children. What was it like for you all to meet, the in-laws, parents, grandparents on other side?
Is that a question to the three Gs, or?
Either or.
I'd love to talk about this.
Either or, if you dare.
I'll take the question from my wife here.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to scroll and see if my mother and father-in-law are on here. So maybe Tom, you answer first while I look.
So I had the best introduction to Lauren's grandmother. She is just the sweetest person in the world. She's about 4'10" now, and I'm 6'2". And so I walk in the door, I don't really know what to expect, and she just comes over and gives me a huge hug and says, "You make my Lauren so happy." And she really set the tone for the whole family. And she made it very known from the beginning that this religion was not important to her. What was important was that her granddaughter was happy. So my first experience with her grandmother was just this outpouring of love and acceptance. There was nothing I didn't feel at all out of place, or that she had any resentment. And just knowing Lauren's grandmother, who's an amazing woman, she looks at life with just so much optimism. And after what she's been through, it's amazing that she can do that. But she sees so much good in the world, and I think she thinks of things that are. I sometimes think of it as she thinks larger than some of the ticky-tacky things that we think about in our lives. Are we going to do this little thing or get frustrated by that little thing? She thinks about the big things. Is my granddaughter happy? So that was a great first meeting with her grandmother.
Yeah, that moment when we met is the moment I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And my grandmother's still alive and still full of joy and light. But when she gave him that hug and the size difference and the love, I'll keep that in my heart forever.
Go ahead. Yeah, all right. Well, it was the first time I met Aiden's parents. Like I said, they live in South Texas, like way down in the valley. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to work. He's like, "I just want to let you know that my mom collects crosses."
I forgot about that.
They're decorative from different artists and stuff like that. And then his little sister texted him there's 147 now. So he's like, "I don't want you to be alarmed."
There's no crucifixes.
No, but there, but because that might make me a little nervous. Yeah. But he was like, I want to warn you. But it was, just welcoming from the get-go. His dad was more concerned whether or not I was a Yankees fan than
mm-hmm.
that I was.
Yeah, that was the main thing.
Right.
If she wasn't a Yankees fan, then there would be a problem.
Right.
A big problem.
Yeah. And I assured him I was born in the Bronx, so it's a prerequisite. So we're good. But obviously they had some questions and wanted to hear about my family and things like that. But it was all pretty easy as far as that went, how open and accepting that they are.
Yeah, well, what's funny is
the big Jesus over the bed where in the
that was my
was a lot, but
and that was storage. But but what was interesting is because Anna and I started dating, and previous to me and Anna dating, I was with somebody else for about 3-4 years, mm-hmm. and they had become very familiarized with family with her, and things didn't work out with our relationship for a number of reasons. So my little sister grew up knowing this other person and was very apprehensive about meeting.
She's much younger.
Yeah, she was like,
she's 17 years younger than him.
yeah, she was like,
Okay.
yeah, like she was like 11, like anyway. But when she met Anna, she was very apprehensive about meeting her. She didn't want to let somebody else into her life. And my family was just like, well, we don't want to let someone else into the family because we don't want to get like connected to somebody who might not be around. I was like, oh, no, like this person's going to be around. Like you need to meet like Anna. And so when Anna showed up, there was automatically kind of this this apprehension because they were like protecting themselves. And within the first day, one of the remarkable things was my father was just talking to me while we were driving to pick up some groceries for dinner or something. And he just told me right off the bat, he was like, there's something different about her. He's like, I can tell by the way that you look at her, like there's something different with you. Like this is the one, right? And I told him, I was like, yeah, like she's going to be around a very long time. So it's very important to me that that you get along with her, that you like her, you know? And it was just an odd feeling, like the first time, like aside from like, you know, religion or upbringing or whatever, there was just something about like Anna, her connection to her family, and just who she was, that my family just automatically accepted her as family. And even my kid sister day one loved her to death, like loved her. And I don't know, like I think it was very easy because of just who you are and like your connection with your family in your past, you know. I don't know, but yeah, that's how I can speak to my in-laws' reaction to you. But my reaction to your in-laws, like
To my parents.
to your parents, yeah, it was very welcoming.
Yeah.
Very, very welcoming.
Well, he basically met my whole
In the
family
mountains.
on one weekend.
Not a
It was
surprise,
it was
right?
my
Yeah.
birthday. There were supposed to be other friends there. They all sort of failed for one reason or another, and he kind of accidentally ended up spending an entire weekend up in the Catskills with, like, I mean, my small family, but all of them.
Yeah, just me. And it was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
He went from not knowing any Jews to just being in
Yeah.
the minority.
Yeah. And they were okay with me, like,
Yes.
yeah,
he loved
yeah,
you. Yeah.
of course.
I think Katie and I are going to pass on this one, though we both love our respective in-laws, so it's not for that. But we do know that we're also running out of time, and something I think is really important for us. I mean, we'll talk about it now, but I think between these three couples, we have 6 lovely kids under 6. And so something that's really important for all of us, if we haven't already started it, is to how to raise 4 Gs in interfaith families, why it's important, and when do we talk about our kids about the Holocaust, and how do we talk about it? So I'm curious to hear about your guys's sort of what your guys's plan is, or how you guys have discussed it. And, you know, why don't we start with Lauren and Tom?
Definitely. It means so much to me to pass down not only parts of my Jewish tradition, but also my grandmother's story. The way I learned about the Holocaust was my grandmother had spoken about it, but we went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And while it was hard and scary and sad, it was a really great way to learn and see the visuals. I think it's really important for children to see a book in their hand, see visuals, pictures, movies, because I think it's really hard for a child to understand just the enormity of what happened. So I think when my children are in elementary school, it'll be a good time to share. But I think it's so important to pass things down, that they know. I'm like the fact that my grandmother knows my 2 children means the world to me. They get to spend time with her and they get to love on her. And that's more than I can ask for. Any thoughts on that?
I don't have a lot to add. One of the things that I think is so great about this organization, frankly, is that we're able to pass along that message. Lauren recently gave a presentation to her company, and she memorized her grandmother's entire story. So, you know, her grandmother's 96. God hope she's with us for a bit longer, but at some point there's not going to be someone around to tell her that story. So we haven't had the conversation on precisely when we'll tell her, but we have the person here that knows that story backward and forward. So that's just a really wonderful amount of knowledge to have and be able to pass on.
What about you, Anna, Aiden, thoughts?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly, they're still so young. So not yet, but we haven't figured that out yet, how to approach it.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because like, you want to preserve the child's innocence and like their view of the world for how long, until you want them to know it's a dangerous place, especially for someone like especially like a Jewish kid, like there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there, and you want to protect them, because sometimes someone might hate on somebody for no reason just because they're different. So when do you tell a kid like that they're different? I don't know, but it is very important to me that that Max and Bobby like understand their Jewish heritage, understand like what it took for their family line to still be around, like it's part of who they are, and they need to like carry on that legacy. It's extremely important, that can't be forgotten.
Yeah, but not putting it on them so soon. Like I don't remember an age where I didn't know. So I don't really want to quite do that to them. What about you?
Yeah, no, same thing. You said you don't remember a time that you didn't know, and I don't know if maybe my parents would say otherwise, but in my view, it didn't necessarily feel like there was a talk about it, because just like I understood what Judaism was, I think for me that was the part of Judaism that I learned, right? Just like we learn stories about the history of Judaism that some of are gruesome and grotesque, right? To me, this was one of the other stories of Judaism, which was, okay, my ancestors, though it was my grandpa and grandma that I knew very well, rather than just someone in a storybook that I learned about on Passover. To me, it was part of the tale of what I learned, and it was something I felt proud of. Only later on, as I started to get older and I was in Hebrew school and we were going and talking about the Holocaust, did I understand that I was a little different than a lot of my other classmates and my friends that were all Jewish. So, I think to me, a lot of it is, it's part of, the teachings of Judaism and the history of our religion as a whole. This is just one of the things that, but again, it's, when to share that, I think is a very interesting question. I think a lot of us, all of us, we have some young kids, so I think we haven't had the experience of when did we decide to sort of rip the Band-Aid off. But for me, I feel in that sense, it's a little bit more organic, or just trying to pair it with, this is what we're proud of. This is who we are as a people, as a family. So I think that's how we kind of think about it.
Is there any organization out there that deals with like the Holocaust education with like young children? Like, is there any blueprint? Like, I'm talking like like preschool, like kindergarten. Like, how do you teach it? Like, I don't know if there's an organization out there. I'm not that well knowledgeable about all the organizations, but like, does that exist?
I don't know. Well, I mean, there was a mention in the chat about an exhibit at the Holocaust Museum that is intended for younger kids, designed for ages 8 and up.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Breckus, our executive director, has said that he took his kids when they were 9 and 11, and it was perfect for them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe we need to add, an extension of the We Do program and think about younger kids.
Yeah,
That's what that's kind of like my point. Is like, yeah, that definitely needs to be a discussion and a thought. Like,
yeah, and I was going to just mention what some folks in the chat were talking about, which is there are definitely books and movies and some films, and I think we even, when I was part of the board member of 3G, I think we were speaking about like there was a video game that someone was developing that was sort of teaching in a interactive way So I think there's definitely a lot of effort into working to teach that into a young age and to make it palatable for discussing with younger children. And I think it's up to us and a lot of the people who are, 3GNY, obviously our goal and the We Do program as a whole is to teach this and to pass this along, and to figure out how to do it for different audiences. So I think it's a challenge for all of us of how to do it. And, I think as a resource, I think 3GNY is a big one and one that we'll have to work with, our cohorts and try to be, especially to those like Dave Reckes and other ones that have older children, who those 4Gs already exist. I think they can, pass on some of their, feelings and thoughts and recommendations. And I'm very excited in a way to explore that with my children when they get to that time. And I think it'll be a fascinating time for us and something that, others don't necessarily deal with. And I think sort of to wrap, to sort of wrap up this whole night, not to cut us off, but it's a special challenge for interfaith couples to deal with this as well. This is a challenge of anyone, right? The question of how do you pass on to 4Gs is one that we all discuss in the community generally, but this is an even more unique one, is how to interweave this into, different faiths, and with kids that maybe celebrate different holidays. And how is it that you celebrate Christmas, but you are a proud 4G and want to pass on your grandparents' stories? So these are challenges that I think we'll all face, and it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. Well, we have about 7 minutes left. We have about 9 questions in the Q&A. I'm just going to fire them off, and whoever 3G spouse, jump on in. Our first question is from Nils. As 3Gs, what has your experience been like being married to spouses whose family did not go through the Holocaust? Did you ever feel there was any tension in that regard?
I'll answer quickly. There definitely wasn't ever any tension. I think the one thing that I never stopped being amazed at is like how many cousins you have. Like his dad is one of 9.
Yeah.
Like he has cousins, he doesn't even know their names. Like that's like wild to me. When we were sending out wedding invitations to people that we knew weren't going to come to the wedding in New York, but it was like, there are so many of them. Yeah. And I just, I have people I call cousins that are not related at all. And he has so many cousins, he doesn't even know them all. So that just kind of always is a little wild to me.
Yeah, I hope my mom's not on here.
Why?
Because then she knows that I don't know the names of all my cousins.
I mean, because they've all your cousins have had kids and now they've had kids. Like,
it's a big family. It's a big family. It's a big family. Yeah.
Sorry, Sylvia.
No worries. And Nils, thank you so much for putting 2 additional questions. I want to get to as many others as possible, and we can come back if we have time. From Levi, what inspired this event? A certain former royal couple? I'm joking. What inspired this event? I'm on the event committee from 3GNY and planned this event series, and I'm a very proud interfaith 3G, and it's something I've thought a lot about, just the community, or just dealing, with my friends and family, having these discussions. And when I got to meet Anna and John in person, actually, there was an event called Bagels and Babies, and I realized we were all interfaith 3Gs, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting you on this event with me because I want for you to share your story with me and with everyone else. So that's what inspired this event. Next question is from Emily. Was being of different faiths an issue at first?
Yes. Yes, definitely. It was a challenge from the first date, as I mentioned right away, but it was something we spoke about. And yeah, I mean, I think for us, the challenge was, mostly internal. I mean, I will say, I think my family was a little bit more guarded than Katie's family. And I think that a lot of that was, because of maybe where my grandparents came from, and to preserve this identity and to make sure of that. But, I think my family was confident in me that I wanted to pass this on, Judaism, but also being a 3G. And I think that they loved Katie from day one as a person. And I think the combination of that sort of made those, fears go away. But yeah, it definitely was a big challenge. And I'm not going to lie, it still is a challenge. I mean, I don't think that goes away. This is, we still have a lot of things to talk about. We still have a lot of problems to go through together. And, I don't think that's, I think it's a lifelong journey that we're going on together, and that we're all here committed to doing that. And we all knew what we were signing up for. But it's constant, it's ever present, and it's something that, we'll grow through together. And I'm, looking forward to each of the times that we do and talk about it. And yeah, I love it.
I love that. I think such a big part of being a successful marriage, and especially interfaith marriage, is being able to compromise and also being able to communicate and to speak forth and manifest what you want, and also be able to pull back and realize, hey, I want my partner to be happy with things too. We're going to take one more question before we close out. This hour flew by. From Anonymous. In what way do you plan on educating your children in a religious fashion so that they have a religious identity or some form of observance? And that can, honestly, I would actually put forth the couples of observance of either faith. It doesn't need to be just one, because we are interfaith, rather than just participating in dinners and tradition.
Well, I would say for us, our plan is very much how I was raised. I went to Hebrew school through my bat mitzvah, and then it was kind of like up to me. My parents were like, you want to continue learning? The idea was like, you should have a base of knowledge, so you should know what you're not choosing if you choose not to do it. And I ended up really involved with USY and things like that, because I felt like nothing was pressured upon me. So it's kind of our plan for our kids. But I don't think you can separate the religious observance towards the other from the traditions, because we're an ethno-religion. They're very much interrelated. And like we talked about, there's no one right way to be Jewish. It's very personal, and I navigated it for myself, and that my kids are going to have to do the same thing for themselves. Hopefully we'll just give them a base.
I'm reminded of something the rabbi told us that married us. He said that, like you don't have to have God in your household to be Jewish. Like there is, like, as long as you do good, and like if you do good and you're a good person, and you know how to treat others, like whether my son decides to have faith in God or not, that's up to him, like you're saying. Like, but they're Jew, like as long as they like have their Jewish identity, I think that's something that we'll always push forward for them to appreciate. And not only that, but like also like, like I'm not Jewish, but I'm like Latino, and I like have like other like ethnicities in me, but it's just like to know exactly who they are, but for God, like, yeah, whatever they want, man. Whatever they want.
Yeah, we have a similar approach that we've talked about, raising our children Jewish and going to Hebrew school, and just like you said, Anna, not pushing them really beyond that, and kind of letting them determine which way they want to go with their life. I will say this is a little bit lighthearted, but just a warning for any parent. My daughter recently came up to me around Easter time and said, "Did Jesus really die and come back to life?" That was a tough one, because I didn't really know how to answer it. That was very pointed, and so I just sort of said, some people believe that, and other people don't, and you can determine on your own what you think is correct. But that was one that I wasn't quite prepared to get into yet. So just beware when they start getting to be 5 or 6, they get a little smart.
And also have a good sense of humor, because that can help ride the wave of some of these questions and challenges. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. We could probably speak for another hour. Thank you to Anna and Aiden. Thank you to Katie and Jonathan. You're all incredible. Thank you to my husband, Tom. To close things out, thank you so much for joining us today. For more information about 3GNY, feel free to go, and also our We Do program, feel free to go to 3gny.org. We have an email list if you'd like to stay in touch for future events and happenings. One upcoming program we'd like to highlight is our 3G Forum, a program offered in partnership with 3G groups around the country. The next forum meeting is on Tuesday, June 6th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Zoom, and we'll be talking about a similar topic to tonight's panel. The forum will be posted on how we talk to each other about being 3Gs and interfaith relationships. We hope you'll consider joining the forum to follow up on tonight's event and have the opportunity to talk up with other 3Gs on this topic. Look for more registration info on our website, and you'll see a follow-up from tonight's event. Thank you to all the couple. Thank you to Dave Rickus, the executive director who's on the line with us, and to all of you. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you.